Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead-making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal-winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support, so get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead-making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to episode number 175. Well, that's a milestone for the Mead House, let me tell you. Welcome back to the show. I know we've been off for a couple of weeks. We've been dealing with some sicknesses and, this whole COVID thing and one thing or another. And, Ryan's been busy changing diapers for a couple of weeks. I'm sure we'll probably get an earful of that too later on. But hey, we're back. Episode number 175. I was just out rototilling the garden when Jeff and Ryan showed up. I'm JD Webb, and I'll probably have to clean the beer lines after they leave. Hey, if you don't know it, I do. You know where to find the Mead House? How about iTunes, Stitcher Radio? How about Spotify, iHeartRadio? And have you heard the latest? We're now on Amazon Music. Hey, you just go to the front page of the website, themeadhouse.com, and just click on any one of those links over there on the left-hand side of the screen. It'll take you right to it. You can sign up, subscribe for us, would you please? And please subscribe to iTunes if you can. You can get iTunes on Android, on your computer, on iPhones, on iPads, on iThis, on iThat. You can just get iTunes everywhere pretty much anymore. I got this new, my eyeballs, okay? They're kind of going south, so I had to get another monitor. What I got was a 43-inch Samsung TV. It's one of these smart deals. And I use it for doing all my photo editing and everything. Well, this thing even has iTunes built into one of the smart function thing on the TV side that I really don't pay that much attention to because I use it as a computer monitor. But anyway, hey, it's there just in case I need it. Hey, in this episode, Ryan, he managed to pick himself up a Mazer Cup this season, and Jeff, he wants to revisit. Now, this is like going way back. I didn't look up the episode number, but I'll tell you what, I will before I post the show tomorrow. And I'll put it in the show notes. We're going way back, deep.
Way back.
Okay, yeah, way back. This is back in the Mississippi Chris days, okay? He and I got hooked up on this, I don't remember the name of the forum anymore. I want to say... oh, come on. Help me out, guys. What was the name of that big beer forum? Everybody goes there.
Like Homebrew Talk or?
Homebrewtalk.com. Yeah. Mississippi Chris and I found this recipe for this stuff called Graft. Now, I don't get all tied up in all this medieval stuff and, these TV shows and these books and whatnot. But apparently this, and you can help me out here, Jeff, this Graft stuff, it has something to do with some book or some story somewhere. It's not even a real thing.
No, it's not real. It's a hypothetical thing that I think was invented by Stephen King in his Dark Tower series.
There you go. Yeah, I remember Chris talking about that. And so this recipe appears in homebrewtalk.com. And we're going back, almost 4 years now. No telling how long the recipe had been up before that. because by the time Chris and I saw it, there was like thousands of posts attributed to this one deal about this graph. Okay, so and we'll get into it more here in just a minute. But it's a kind of an apple juice based thing with some hops and whatnot. I tell you what, we'll save the rest of it for segment 1. And in segment 2, Will Ott is going to join us, avid listener. He'll be along. He listens to the show quite a bit. He was listening during one of the episodes when we were talking. I think this might have been in a Facebook Friends. I'll have to go back and research that one as well. But we had been talking about the use of bentonite. I remember the conversation that we were having, and it was a question I believe posed by a Facebook or a listener about using bentonite as a clearing agent, commonly used in winemaking, home winemaking. Will had a little extra information that he wanted to share with us, so we'll be talking to him in segment 2. And then, of course, segment 3, this Facebook, well, we need to change the name of this, too. Facebook and Reddit friends, I guess. FR and F, I guess. I don't know. Facebook friends and Reddit friends. This, of course, is where we try to answer questions about making mead with no formal expertise other than what we've experienced in our own brew house. But, hey, all that and more here at the house. But first of all, hey, thanks to all of the Mead House key holders like Jim Pence, who help keep the Mead House podcast free. You too can become a Mead House key holder and help support the show for as little as $2 a month. We've got some great thank you gifts to send out to you. So get on over to patreon.com, search the Mead House, or just click on the link in the show notes. And as I adjust my little deal here, okay, so what are we drinking tonight? I'll start it off. I thought I was all out of mead, and because I haven't brewed anything for a little while, and I found a bottle of the Sap House Meadery World on a String, and this is an herbal tea mead, and I'm not real. I mean, I like my Earl Grey tea. Not much of an herbal tea type drinker. And I thought, oh boy. So I'll drink this one tonight. So I kind of cheated before the show. I had a little sip, and it's one of those holy moments. This stuff is really good. Oh my God. Very floral, definitely a sweet mead. And this would be a really great dessert wine. Jeff, I don't know if you got this in your box here a while back.
I did.
I don't know what tea. It just says herbal tea mead. I didn't look it up, and I didn't get the 411 from Ash last time we talked. But this is really good stuff. I like this. I don't know that I would drink this with a dinner, but certainly as a nice little dessert wine, chilled, after dinner. Maybe a small cheese plate or something, a little more savory. It's got some sweetness to it that's just really quite nice. Very, very floral on the nose. Ooh, and that honey character just reeks. Almost like a. I wonder if that's a wildflower he used. Why? What an aroma, man! If you could just bottle up the aroma and put that in an aerosol can, I wonder if you could sell that. Anyway, in my other fist, I'm drinking an old favorite tonight, and this is a bourbon. It's actually distilled in the Rocky Mountains. This is called Breckenridge Bourbon Whiskey, made in Colorado. And this stuff, I mean, if you're a bourbon drinker, you need to get a bottle of this and just put it high on the shelf and just kind of tuck it away. Just get this out when you got those special friends that come over. This is really, really good bourbon. I'm going to say it's in about the $45 range, plus or minus. This is not a bourbon that you want to put in a mason jar and soak some oak in. This is not that kind of bourbon. I've kind of run down that list here a while back. Maybe I should do it again. There's bourbons that I like to use to soak wood in to put into my meads and braggots and whatnot. This is not one of those types of bourbons. Okay, this is not a cocktail bourbon. This is a sipper. This is a sipping bourbon. This is one of those bourbons you want to pour a couple of fingers, not on ice, not in a chilled glass, nothing. You want to drink this just like God intended, right, straight up. You sit in that big overstuffed leather chair with that little dim reading light, and you just sit there and just sip this thing away and just kind of contemplate. This is an outstanding bourbon. A lot of sweetness up on the tongue. You get all the barrel flavors, the vanillins, the caramels, the brown sugars. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. The corn gives it that sweetness, the corn mash. Oh, my God. Holy cow. And smooth as glass for about an 86 proof bourbon. So this is a very nice, very smooth, very sweet. Another one. As the wife is drinking the Sap House World on a String herbal tea mead for dessert, I'll be sitting next to her, sipping on my couple of fingers of Breckenridge, Colorado bourbon. So that's what I'm doing tonight, Jeff. What did you put in your glass?
Well, some days I have a theme to my two beverages of choice. Today I don't, because yesterday evening we got back from a rather long road trip to see my sister-in-law get married out in Alabama. Today I pulled an 11-hour day trying to catch up from part of a week off of work that I had some deadlines I needed to stretch out, so I just kind of grabbed two bottles out of the fridge. They could not be more different, but I'm pretty pleased with both of them. My first glass has another Sap House entry here. This is the peach maple. I was holding on to this for a while.
That's
kind of a special occasion kind of a thing. And we had some company over about a week ago for dinner, kind of a low-key, just being social and whatnot. So this is the last of that bottle. And, I am not a fan of peach flavor in general, but this is still really nice. The balance is there. There's a little bit of tartness in it. The maple comes through as kind of just a supporting flavor to the peach. Mm-hmm. The balance is like anything Sap House makes. It's right there, man. I get some of that honey and the aroma along with the peaches. The honey really comes through in the back end. It's for someone that doesn't like peaches, this is a damn nice peach mead.
So I dig
it. My other fist is not a mead. It is this is Darkness by Surly Brewing Company. It is a Russian Imperial Stout, and this is surprising the hell out of me, to be honest with you. When I think of a Russian Imperial Stout, I think of something dark as all get out, and this is, but it also just very, very hop forward. I think the idea behind the style is that they put a lot of hops into it to survive the trip from England or wherever this was being brewed to Russia. Kind of similar to the IPA style, where they had a lot of hops as a preservation quality to get to India. This is not hop forward at all. There is like a hoppy character to it. It has a little bit of a bitterness on the back end, but it comes through just more or less like a sweet stout, and it's very nice. I get some of the bitter notes and the chocolatey notes that you get. There's like a very molassesy forward kind of a character on the mid palate. Overall, this comes out fairly sweet. So, this is very different for a Russian Imperial Stout, but honestly, this might be a little bit more to my taste than the regular one. So,
Sounds good.
That's what I'm drinking.
There you go. Ryan, a couple of weeks worth of changing diapers and picking up after little ones, and what's in your glass tonight, bud?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that little Quattro is 2 months old next week already.
Wow.
It seems like about a week and about a year at the same time. If anybody out there can know what I mean by that, if that something can seem like it goes by in the blink of an eye, and at the same time can seem like it's been there forever. So
what's in your cup?
I've got a version of a Ryan Braggot. I mentioned that I had been brewing some stuff that Andrea wanted, and so this is a version of the Ryan Braggot that's made with wheat malt. So heavily wheat malt, not 100%, but about 50% wheat malt, and Saison yeast.
Oh wow!
And it's very delicious. It's very nice. I like that one. Andrea likes that one. A little bit darker in color, from the wheat malt than the not much. I should say just maybe a tiny bit darker than the Pilsen malt, but. It's very, very good. Gives it a little extra, a little different body. The Saison yeast is a little different ester profile. So it's, it's a really nice variant of the Ryan Braggot and goes really well. And I am drinking that one tonight. And a little earlier tonight, I had one of the Belgian-inspired braggots that I had made at the same time. So this was a Belgian double-inspired braggot. It starts out as basically a clone of Chimay Red, and then I do some late edition honey, and by late edition I mean in the fermenter. So late edition to the fermenter honey, and that one also that came out really nice. Really enjoying that one. It's got everything you'd expect from a double, and it's a little sneaky in that it's a little stronger than the typical braggots I make, but you wouldn't know it by drinking it. So anyway, it very, very tasty, very, very nice, I'd say these last two it was a success. That double brew day I talked about on one of our previous shows turned out to be a nice success.
Let me ask you about the wheat. I've had wheat beers. I've had several different styles with wheat malt. I can't get around it almost has this cut grass hay. It reminds me of chewing on, when I had the ranch in Colorado, you pluck a piece of grass and stick it in your mouth and chew on it. That's what it reminds me of. How do you get around, or do you? Or is that just one of those flavors that you're looking for?
Well, there's two different possibilities there. One of them is when you drink. A lot of people think wheat beers. Maybe they don't anymore, but they used to think like German Hefeweizen. Mm-hmm. And the German Hefeweizen, the wheat beer, the German wheat beer, always had these really distinct flavors like clove and banana and things like that. And that really came from the traditional yeast that was used in the Hefeweizen. Now, I've made wheat beers, 50% wheat and more, mm-hmm. that don't, have those flavors because I'm not using that strain of yeast. So I think the reason I give that anecdote is you want to know where that flavor is coming from. Is it coming from the malt? Is it coming from the yeast, or is it coming from the hops? Mm-hmm. I've also had a lot of hops that or a lot of beers, the hops that come across that grassy flavor. That's just comes from the hops. So the question is trying to identify where it's coming from. Now, malt in a beer is the least flavor contributor.
Right.
I forget the breakdown, but I was at a HomebrewCon seminar, and I forget the brew scientist giving it, but he was breaking down that and I'm oversimplifying this, right? But he's basically said 45% of the flavor of beer, comes from the hops. 45% of the flavor of the beer comes from the yeast, and 10% comes from the malt. I'm oversimplifying because depending on the style, sure, a Pilsner, or a pale ale or an IPA, versus, a Russian Imperial Stout or something like that. So it wasn't necessarily, I'm being a little facetious here with 10%, but the takeaway is that it's the biggest flavor components of a beer and a braggot, because we're talking about braggots here, are going to come from the hops and the yeast, and the malt is going to be a less of a flavor driver.
Right.
Where that gets tricky, and I'm catching myself here before I get on a rabbit hole, but where that gets tricky is that certain yeasts and certain hops actually can bring out flavors in malts as well, and so while you might get somewhat of a malty flavor, if you did that with two different yeasts, you ran like a side by side. In one, the one yeast might not bring out the malt as much as another yeast would. So even though you're tasting the malt, the yeast is really a big flavor driver behind that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. We should bring on beer people much smarter than me to talk about that. I don't remember your original question, JD. No,
well,
I'm
it's
kidding.
just
We're talking about the cut grass and the wheat.
Yeah.
But no, I don't get that at all in this.
Yeah.
And typically not something that I get in my wheat.
Well,
braggots.
I'll have to give it a go. Like I said, the bitten, this wasn't a braggot or anything that I had. It was over the course of time I had tried. I thought, what are these wheat beers? What is this all about? So I'd pick up, you go to Bevmo or Total Wine, you picked up a little 6-pack carton. You can put singles and, make your own little 6-pack. So I grabbed a couple of those with all different kinds of wheat beers that I could find. But, man, I think I threw some of them away or gave some of them away to my neighbors because a couple of that I had it tasted like I was chewing on a hay bale. And I thought, I don't know what the deal is here, but this is not for me. So I'll try it again. I'll give it another shot. What the hell? And I get the whole thing. The malt for me just adds a degree of that mouthfeel, maybe a little bit of flavor, but not a whole lot. And I agree. Flavors come from, all the other things, all the other components that you put into it. But while we're on the subject of hayfields, you did manage to pick up a medal while we were off. You want to tell us what that's all about?
Yeah, so while we were off, the Mazer Cup announced their results. And my name did hit the leaderboard, and I, medal or a cup, whatever you want to call it over there. I picked up one for dry fruit and spice. Now,
dry fruit and spice.
Dry fruit and spice. This is one that you guys have both had, and it was a cherry melomel with Malab. So
And you made that you made that a long time ago, didn't you?
I did. I made that
Yes.
not from this year's cherry harvest, but from last year's cherry harvest.
I recall.
Originally when we submitted to the Mazer Cup, I wouldn't have had any fresh cherries to make a mead with to submit to this year's Mazer Cup. So it was the previous year's harvest that I had time to turn into a mead to submit to the original deadline. If they had done the submissions, if they had known that they were going to have to postpone and done the submissions, I could have made it with this year's. But anyway, long story short, it was a cherry mead that I made from the cherries grown in Andrea, my wife's grandfather. His has a cherry tree in his side lawn, and so St. Paul, Minnesota cherries, right in the city limits of St. Paul. I got a bunch of cherries, and did kind of a freeze thaw and some enzyme and kind of really worked them, and tried to get as much juice and extracting out of them as possible. I fermented them, right on the skins and on the skins and on the pits. I didn't do anything like that, and then probably there were some stems in there as well, and then in secondary, and it was just I believe it was that my notes in front of me, but it was probably a clover honey. It was clover or a really nice light wildflower, one of those two, and then I when I racked it into secondary, I put it on Malab. So the spice, the denatured cherry pits, the Malab, I had it sitting on those. So it was on those for quite a while. And then I was tasting it, and I added a cherry wood, wood spiral or wood stick.
Yeah.
I forget. I think it was the honeycomb. It was the honeycomb cherry wood stick. And I put that in there and let that sit for a while. And then it was really good, very light bodied. I mean, this is a really light bodied kind of, on the lower ABV light side. And it drank beautifully. It just very light, wonderful cherry bouquet. Just a little bit of, little bit of tannin, just a little bit of body, came across, just very, very nicely.
Yeah.
And,
I recall.
That was basically it, just the cherries, the fruit, the Malab is the spice. I like doing it dry. So the dry fruit and spice, and, I was very pleased with it being recognized. The judges liked it. I will say that, it was not the gold medal in the category. Mr. Tom Repus took the gold medal in that category. So
yes,
if I'm gonna lose to somebody, somebody's gonna take the gold in that category. I'm glad it was Tom.
Oh yeah.
Couldn't be a nicer guy. And
for all of our listeners out there who may not know what Malab is, you've mentioned it a couple of times here. That's actually that pit of the cherry, right?
Yeah. So I actually do not know off the top of my head the process that the cherry pit undergoes to become Malab.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you look at a bottle of it, it just says like denatured cherry pits. And it's used commonly in Middle Eastern cooking, quite a bit, and so, but it does have a unique flavor. And I know you're going to talk about Mississippi in a little bit here. Mm-hmm. He was one of the guys who talked about using Malab in his cherry meads.
Yep.
Now he made much sweeter higher alcohol ones than I did, but the same holds true. I think he used to say it was kind of like putting vanilla in your chocolate,
Yep.
in that
Yep.
you don't really taste the vanilla, but it helps the chocolate taste more like chocolate.
Yeah.
And I think that because drinking this, you get a little bit of like cherry pie spice. You might think, oh, there's a little bit of cherry pie spice. It's kind of there's a little je ne sais quoi. It's not exactly just somebody throwing a bunch of cherries in this and making a cherry wine.
Right.
There's a little something more, and that's really what the Malab brought to this mead. And frankly, I left the Malab on there a lot longer than most mead makers would be comfortable with. And that's how it picked up that flavor. If I had done it much shorter, it probably wouldn't have been nearly as noticeable. But I let it really sit on there. And as I was tasting it over the weeks and even months that it was on there, that cherry spice just really came out more.
Outstanding.
So, Ryan, you said this is the low ABV, kind of light body. Did you leave this still, or was this sparkling?
This was still.
Okay.
This is one of the few still meads I make. I believe this would be worth trying carbonated, probably very low carbonated, because at a higher carbonation, I fear you might lose a little bit of the delicacy.
Yeah.
I could see that. Sure.
I remember it coming in one of those little, you used to love using those little, 12 millimeter, whatever, those little tiny little, I think they were less than that. They were like
the little 6 ouncers.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, like
but I don't
12 milliliter, whatever.
I sent you a bigger one than that. I think I sent you a 12 ouncer.
I don't remember. I thought it might have been in one of those little ones, but good stuff. Well, congratulations, Ryan. Bringing one home for the Mead House. Good stuff.
Absolutely, it's good to see the Mead House on the leaderboard there.
There you go.
Raising a glass to you there.
Yeah, Ryan, congratulations on the win there from Mazer Cup, and I do remember having that cherry mead. That was outstanding stuff. Really good. So Jeff, you and I mean, this may, I don't know if this predates Ryan or not.
I think it does.
It may. This is back when, now some of you older listeners may recall Mississippi Chris, and when he actually helped me start this whole. In fact, he's the guy responsible for me starting this whole thing up again after leaving the other show. So it was Jeff and me and Chris, and I think Aaron Martin was there. But this graph discussion came, I think this might predate Ryan, but he was in on some subsequent episodes, I believe, when we talked about it. Now, I'm going to let you explain what graph is and how this whole thing got started, and how we,
sure,
and then I'll chime in as we go along here. But graph, what the hell is it?
Much like JD, I've not looked up the previous episode number or numbers, but I have a feeling it was in the teens or the 20s, because
at least
it was quite a while ago. Graph is kind of an attempt at making I don't want to say it's a mead, I'm not a mead, a beer cider hybrid, because the idea is more to enhance cider.
Kind of a beer cider hybrid sizer.
Yeah.
What the hell would you call it?
The end goal, as I understand it, is to make something that tastes like cider, but with a lot more character to it. Because, thanks to Prohibition, a lot of the cider orchards got the axe. And so the idea was to use, beer ingredients like malt, hops, things like that, to give more cider character, to make a richer drink. Yeah. And, I'm in a position now where probably in about 2 weeks here, we're going to be ripping out carpet. I'm going to be laying new carpet. We're trying to get as much stuff out of our house to just, facilitate painting and putting in new floors and stuff like that just come with getting ready to sell this house. I'm a very do-it-yourself kind of minded person, and scoff at the idea of paying somebody to do work I'm perfectly capable of doing myself. So I don't want to quit brewing entirely, but this is going to be a weird winter for me, and I'm looking for anything I can do to make, winter-ish, fall-ish beverages, but they have to be able to turn around really quickly, and they have to be able to be put into a bottle relatively quickly, so I can just have those and move those really easily.
So you're looking to do another graph, right?
Yeah, like graph, because I've done a lot of ciders, and I kind of wanted to try something a little different. And it struck me that, hey, I meant to try a graph ages and ages ago when JD and Mississippi were talking about it, and I never did. And then I happened on this this Brewlosophy article while I was, taking my my turn off driving over this weekend, and they were talking about graph. I think this was about a year and a half ago, if I remember right. Well, I sent JD the link, so we'll have it in the show notes and stuff. And it looked entirely different than I remember what JD's recipe said.
Yeah.
If I remember right, JD's recipe involved a small amount of crystal or caramel 60 or 120. And this one is using pale ale malt. And JD's recipe was involving some pretty traditional, English ale kind of hops, like Fuggles or
something like that. Yeah.
Something like that, if I remember right. And again, it's been a minute since I've listened to that episode.
It's not necessarily JD's. The recipe actually came from homebrewtalk.com, which is, if you haven't been there, check. I'll put the link in the show notes. About home. I mean, this place is gigantic. I mean, everything you ever want to know about beer brewing. I mean, this is the go-to place.
Well, and if I remember right, you and Mississippi were talking about this one particular thread that you read. The graph article was like 80 pages or something.
Oh, my God, yeah. I mean, it's just like that. Yeah, thousands of posts got involved with this graph thing. And the history of it, Jeff, came from a book that Stephen King wrote.
Yeah, a book series, the Dark Tower series. That I've not read.
Yeah.
I've read a couple of his early books, but I really should be getting more into his stuff. Anyway, yes, it was kind of a speculative thing that somebody decided to make a real thing. And more out of curiosity than anything else, I'm curious about trying this. And, the Brewlosophy guys, their hop schedule uses like Cascade and Citra, both of which I have plenty of.
Yeah, good stuff.
So part of me is thinking, well, we've heard about an attempt at graph, and this is a very different attempt at graph. They have some of their notes as far as, they used pale malt almost exclusively. Yeah. And said they needed a little bit more, they were looking for a little bit more like caramely character. They wanted to use some Munich or some vanilla. Not vanilla, Vienna.
I can see that because I don't have my book in front of me that has a recipe that Mississippi and I did. I mean, you can go over to homebrewtalk.com. I think the post is still up there. Right. But it was this. I mean, and it has been fleshed out so many times. But the initial recipe up there was kind of an oddball thing. Apple juice, crystal malt, these odd hops. I don't remember exactly, how much of each one. The end result, I remember, took a really long time to come around. And then it had a very short drinkable period, and then it went south again. So it's, it was kind of a fun thing. I mean, Mississippi, every once in a while, we'd drag a bottle out on the show, and we'd give our rendition about what we felt about this whole thing. So I'm glad this recipe. I looked it over. I saw that link that you sent out, and I looked over the recipe just briefly, and it's quite different than that old graph that we had over at Homebrew Talk. So, best of luck.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, what kind of changes I can make. And hey, I'm going to throw this out to our listening audience. If you have ideas in the next week or so, before I get a chance to go buy 5 gallons of apple juice and put this together, shoot us a message, Facebook, email, the website, Twitter, however you want to get a hold of us.
Info at themeadhouse.com. That's usually the best way. We get tons of emails from listeners that way. We do have a guest on the line. We're actually going to be talking to her in segment 2. I want to get Will in here and find out if he's ever heard of this stuff and what he thinks about this stuff. Will, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, I don't know if you've been catching some of this conversation we've been having. This graph, okay? This is like a fictitious. It's not like a real thing. This is out of a Stephen King novel that, somebody put this recipe. They call it graph, and it's somehow mildly related to mead. Utilizing honey, apple juice, some beer brewing ingredients, hops, and whatnot. And it was kind of an oddball thing. Have you ever heard of anything called graph?
I've heard the word, but I couldn't have put a definition to it before I Googled it after you mentioned it.
It's kind of a weird thing. I remember when, like Jeff says, you'd have to go way back into the very, very early episodes here at the Mead House. Mississippi Chris was one of our co-hosts, and he and I, we put this recipe together. We did it at pretty much the same. I think we're just days apart, so that we designed it that way to be very, very close in our fermentation process, aging process, the whole 9 yards, so we could offer up, what we thought about it as time went on, and we would taste it. Periodically as time went on. And as I recall, Jeff, this stuff had to sit for like months and months and months before it finally came around and it was palatable. So I'm hoping that the recipe that you found, it actually looks pretty good. I'm hoping that
I think you mentioned that it came up very cider forward after just a week. So using lighter malts may be the go-to here, but I think I will probably add some darker malts in there too, just for a little extra interest.
Yeah, I remember. I remember as time went on, the appley flavors really. Of course, this is true with ciders too. If you're making ciders out of Kirkman's or Treetop or whatever apple juice, like I do, I don't have access to good apple juice, so it's whatever I can get out of the store. 100% apple juice, none of this. It's all juice. It's not from concentrate. It's all real apple juice, so that's what I use for I do it every year. I mean, it's like a staple around here. My cider, my dry cider, and but it takes. I mean, I usually make it for the fall, but I have to get started at the beginning of the summer because it takes that long for it to age out and that apple flavor to really develop. And that's what this graph was like, Jeff. So, I didn't read a whole lot. I mean, I kind of skimmed over the recipe. I like what the guy's got going there, but I'd like to find out more about it and find out, how long he had to let it sit, before all those flavors started coming together. So that's kind of a key thing about that. So
there's not a lot of follow-up to the recipe, and I will acknowledge that. If I wind up having to sit on this until springtime, that's as it is. I mean, it's fine. But I'm hoping to have something for late fall, early winter, kind of a drinker, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. In the meantime, you heard him. We've got Will Ott. Now, I hope I said that last name right, Will.
Well, it's I've learned to take all pronunciations. You know, my wife and I got married, you know, about 10 years ago almost. And the week after we got married and she changed her name, she wound up in the emergency room because she got a concussion while we were moving.
Ooh.
And so I rushed over and I found the room she was in. She looks up at me and tears said, "Nobody knows how to pronounce my name."
No. Oh my God. So
But,
what is it? Did I say it right or
uh,
did I butcher it all to hell?
Well, you were closer to the German pronunciation, but it's, you know, we pronounce it Adi. You know, my family is German, and
Okay.
you know, sometime around, you know, like the mid 1940s, they decided to try to Americanize the pronunciation for some reason. I can't imagine why.
And that always makes it worse, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. Well, hey, you know, it was some time ago. I think it was on a Facebook Friends. We were doing it here on Facebook or on the Meat House, and we were. I think one of the questions that was posed was a discussion about using different clarifiers. One of them, in particular, bentonite. And I've used it off and on. I don't use it on a regular basis. I've made a couple of wine kits. It always comes with the kit, and that's the very first thing you do is get your bentonite in your fermenter, and then put your juice in, add your water, the yeast, the whole 9 yards, and then go for it. You contacted us, sent us an email. You'd heard that episode and had some pretty good information about using bentonite. So tell us your experience with using clarifiers in bentonite in particular.
Yeah, no, I think what I sent you could probably be generously described as a screed, I think.
Sure.
But but no, I mean, I think bentonite's amazing. I haven't been at this too long. I started, you know, a little over a year, a few months ago. But you know, I quickly became obsessed with, you know, everything that comes after you actually ferment. Right, that's what I love about mead, and it's why I can't do beer. Beer, you have to get everything right up front, and then it's just let it ride. Mead, you mess with it after the fact. So, you know, I've just sort of become obsessed with finding. And, you know, finding is more than just clarity, but that's probably another show. But, you know, bentonite, I spent a lot of time playing with several different clarifying agents, and bentonite is it was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that there are several other mead makers, you know, on Reddit and on our Discord that have had similar experiences, and it's just a great little thing. And you know, I think bentonite is really sort of poorly understood in some cases, right? Because I remember, like, on that particular show, you were talking about, oh, you know, you've got to rehydrate the slurry and boil it and stir and stir and stir, blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, I think you were talking about using it in secondary.
Yeah.
So, you know, the first thing that I found, and I think it might have, forget who it was that sort of you know, gave me this, you know, that planted this in my head. But you know, basically, you know, number one, bentonite is best used in primary, right?
Yeah. I agree.
And you know, that's because it works best when it's constantly roused into suspension, right? Every time it goes up, it catches more stuff, it falls back down faster. And the fermentation kinetics are really good for that, right? Because it serves as nucleation points for CO2. That bubble brings it up, and then it pops, and it falls back down, grabs more stuff. So if you add it at the start of fermentation, it really starts to, you know, clarify your mead sort of, preemptively, if you will. Like, I've had some meads that come out of primary, usually traditionals, like already clear enough to read through.
Wow.
The other thing that I found is that it tends to preserve aromatics a bit more. That's something that I'm becoming obsessed with.
That's
now.
interesting.
Yeah, and some of the research I've done has indicated that it's because, like, the protein findings, which is, you know, from what I understand, some of the more aggressive things, you know, basically happens before the volatile aromatics are produced in the meat.
So let me back you up here a little bit.
Sure.
Let's go back to the beginning here, okay? And adding this to the fermenter right up front, you say. And I mean, this is a common practice when you get these wine kits. That's pretty much my my basic experience with it. You get the cup of hot water, you put the stuff in your fermenter, you mix it up real good, and then immediately put your juice in, and water and yeast, and let it rip. So how are you approaching this from the get go? How do you mix up your bentonite? Because let me give you a little backstory on bentonite. Okay, I come from Colorado, the oil fields in Colorado. All right, bentonite was a chemical that we used. It was actually a lubrication for the hole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we mixed up bentonite down in the mixer room, and we pumped it down the drill hole and circulated it through the hole. And that's what actually it was like oil. It's like snot. Okay. Yeah. If you ever messed around with it, if your kids ever messed around with it, you'll know. I mean, this stuff is like snot, and it gets everywhere. Get it on don't get it on your clothes, because you're going to mess up your clothes washer. I guarantee it. But anyway, so that's my experience with it. So I know what this bentonite stuff is, but using it in a mead or a wine or something like that, how do you approach it from the very beginning? What's your methodology there?
So the first thing that you really need to remember is that bentonite inactivates enzymes, right? So if you add bentonite with your enzymes, if you're doing like a fruited mead, the enzymes are not going to do anything, right? So if you're going to be using enzymes, you need to either add them before you add the bentonite, or you need to rack off the bentonite if you're adding those enzymes in secondary.
So enzymes. So we're talking like what, pectic enzyme, that kind of thing.
Pectic enzyme, LAL enzyme,
okay,
rapidase, things like that, right? So if you're using bentonite in primary, or if you're using bentonite, in a process that involves enzymes, you really need to wait at least 24 hours after you add those enzymes, so that they have a chance to do their work before you eat that bentonite in.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So typically, if I'm doing a fruited mead, which I haven't done many of them, I'll add the enzymes at pitch, and then I'll toss the bentonite in, with the first nutrient addition. I've just basically started doing that with every mead, so I don't forget. With the first nutrient addition at 24 hours, I just eat the bentonite in.
Yeah.
And when I say eat the bentonite in, like, I literally do that. I don't bother rehydrating it and making the slurry and boiling it and stirring it.
Really?
Whatever. I just toss it and dry.
So you make you just get what, a couple of tablespoons or teaspoon or whatever, and just toss it in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use measuring spoons. I measure it on a scale, but I just toss it in.
Wow. Okay.
And the experience that I've had, and experience that some others have had, is that the fermentation kinetics is just a fine job of rehydrating it. And so, my suspicion is that, the rehydration is very important if you're using it in secondary, right? But there's plenty of churn that happens because of all the CO2 and fermentation kinetics, things like that, I found that it, rehydrates just fine, and it's just as effective.
Wow. Okay. I'm learning something new here. So yeah, because I even once took a mason jar and added some to a mason jar with a bunch of water and mixed it up, thinking I'll just stay ahead of the game and have the stuff already mixed up. Don't do that either. Don't do that. It
settle out real good.
Oh yeah, it just turned into a hockey puck at the bottom of the mason jar. So
yeah.
But so you mix it in dry. That's very interesting. All these wine kits, they tell you get the boil the water and make sure you get the juice in relatively quickly after you add the bentonite in the boiling water, and because you don't want this thing to cake up at the bottom of the fermenter. And here you are adding it in dry. I never heard of such a thing. Wow, interesting, very interesting.
Well, and there are actually formulations. Sorry, what's that?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was just asking, how much are you using in primary there, as far as like a grams or ounces per gallon?
I think somewhere between 6 and 12. I've been sort of playing with it. Okay. I'm using a slightly more refined version of bentonite that I started pitching it in dry with the LD Carlson stuff, but sure. I also started experimenting with different kinds of bentonite. There are kind of like two broad classes. There's sodium bentonite, there's calcium bentonite,
Sure.
and the only ones that could get in the calcium bentonite are actually formulated for dry pitching.
Oh wow. Okay, so calcium bentonite. Okay.
Yes. So, sodium bentonite is, I had some email exchanges with LD Carlson that most people buy is sodium bentonite. And that is, I believe, most effective at pH below 3.5 or so. Calcium bentonite is more effective over 3.5. And the dosages of the two need to be different, right? So sodium bentonite is more effective, and so you need a smaller dose than if you're using calcium bentonite, which you need a larger dose.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm.
I want to say it was the calcium bentonite that we were putting down the hole, and I do remember the geologist always measuring the pH. It had something to do with kinetic energy. And the electricity that the pipe generated in a dry hole. So, I mean, this is all science crap, in the oil industry, not having anything to do with what we're talking about. But, things are starting to pop back into my head again here. I've been out of the industry for, 40 years now. So it's just, wow, unbelievable.
It's funny how these things will jog little memory snippets coming back into you, right?
I mean, I remember going down to the mudroom, and I mean, we used to get the stuff in like 100-pound bags, and especially when we, after we had set surface casing and started deep holing it. I mean, you had to get something down the hole to keep the pipe lubricated. Otherwise, I mean, it generates a lot of heat, so the pipe expands, it sticks to the side of the hole, and you're done. So this lubricant, bentonite, is what we use. And I remember mixing bag after bag after bag. I mean, a whole 8-hour shift, nothing but mixing bentonite and to pump down the hole. So, yeah, all this is coming back in my mind again. So talk about the two-stage clarifiers. How do you rate bentonite against like sparkaloid or some of these other Jeff, what's that two-stage one that you use? Yeah, dual fine.
Dual fine. Yeah. So that's Kiesel Sol and chitin.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Talk about how. Do you have a preference here, or do you use them together, or is there a benefit there at all? Talk about
absolutely.
that a little bit.
Right. So, I'm a recovering academic, and, the first thing that I did when, like when I approach new research, problem in the before times is you sit down and you create a taxonomy of the things that you're investigating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, one way you can broadly classify finding or clarifying agents is like they either have a positive charge or a negative charge.
Yes. Yep.
So if they're positively charged, they attract negatively charged things. If they're negatively charged, they attract positively charged things. Bentonite has a fairly strong negative charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you want to pair it with something that has a fairly strong positive charge, right? So they can sort of counterfind each other, that, they attract things that the other one doesn't. And so, typically if I'm using bentonite in primary, I find that, by the time I've done my tannate adjustments, let it sit there for, a couple, 3 months, it's already cleared up and I don't need to find further. I've got a big old bag of sparkaloid that I use with it, which has a strong positive charge. And I find that the two of those work together very well.
Wow.
Now, the problem is sparkaloid's been discontinued.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Wow. Scott Labs decided that they weren't going to make it anymore because it contains diatomaceous earth, which, if you breathe in a bunch of that, it, causes cancer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the pro tip there is if you like sparkaloid, go and buy more.
Get it now, yeah. Right. So are they replacing it with anything, or are we just out of luck?
The guidance that they've given is to switch over to some very expensive enzymes that they sell.
Oh. Okay. Keep it in the family, huh?
Yeah. And these things are definitely not priced for the home brew market. One of them is, $80 or $90 for a jug, and the other one's like $250 for a jug.
Meant for like 5,000 gallons of. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there's the positively charged, alternatives are going to be like some of your protein-based fighting agents like gelatin or egg whites, casein or isinglass, chitosan, which is part of the dual fine. I think would probably be a good, replacement. I've got a huge sack of bentonite, but I'm planning on at some point next year after I finish all my the experiments I'm doing with aroma this fall or winter now, I guess it is, to play around with some of those other possibly charged fighting agents to sort of see which ones I like.
Okay, so now, Ryan, I don't know about you and Jeff, but this guy needs to be on our show like once a month. I mean, you know what? I mean, sometimes we joke about, you can hear the pen scratchings in the background. Jeff and I and Ryan we're all taking notes. I'll tell you, you have just filled 2 segments in the last 20 minutes. We could have easily spread this out over a whole freaking 6-week period here.
I mean, perfect honesty, I've been kind of passively putting together a finishing mead after the fining and just kind of all those fine-tuned details.
Yeah.
Would love to collaborate with you offline and try and make another segment on that alone, Will.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's actually something that I've been meaning to write up for the Reddit wiki. Is basically I've spent a lot of time developing a bench trial process that works pretty well for small batches of mead. So if you're doing 1 to 4 gallons, you can do bench trials with 200, 250, 300 mils of product, and not because all the bench trial guides you find out there are like, okay, you make 6 different samples, so 375 milliliters, and because I think that whole everything after process is so much fun.
It is,
and so yeah, I mean, I'd really love to talk to you all more about it. I'd be interested to talk to you offline.
I know Ryan's either feeding Quattro or changing a diaper, one or the other. I'll ask the question that he's dying to ask right now. Will, you said you've only been doing this for a year. What made you get started into making mead?
Well, I got into. I moved up to Minnesota about 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I moved out to the suburbs, and my wife and I were really interested in keeping chickens. And so I was, reading up on the city ordinances for the city we moved to, and I saw that they had an apiary ordinance. And I was like, all right, I guess I got to keep bees. So, the last year was just an absolutely crazy nectar flow, and I wound up with about 50 pounds of honey that I didn't expect. It's like, what am I going to do with all this?
Oh my God.
So, I guess I'll try making mead. And I had maybe mead 20 years ago at a Renaissance festival. And, I went and picked up the bomb recipe and made 2 or 3 of those. And,
Yeah.
Then started educating myself. And
you know what? I don't know about Jeff and Ryan, dude, but let me tell you something. You fit right in here at the Mead House. I'm telling you. I mean, you could just as easily have been sitting here for the last 4 years doing this show with us. I'm serious. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff. Ryan, you got anything to add on or pick up on, or are you busy taking notes?
No, Will, it sounds great what you're doing. Something you said earlier. In a lot of beer making, everything you do, or a lot of what you do is before fermentation. I'd say 80% of it or more is before fermentation, depending on the style. Unless you're going to dry hop it or age it on coffee beans or put it in a barrel or something like that, where in a lot of mead making and some wine making, once the fermentation is complete, then you do 80% of your work, adding acids or tannins or, doing your clarifying and everything else to kind of do that. So it is a very interesting fundamental different approach to how you go about doing it. And I completely, transparent. It's something that I struggle with a little more because I'm used to more of the beer approach, right? I do a lot of my work, in beer, and a lot of my my braggots, that kind of thing, before I ferment, and then after it's done fermenting, there's really not much more that goes on. So to me, it's always a learning or a stretching or a new opportunity to do things that you don't usually do, and hearing you talk about some of the things you've done definitely gives me a little more inspiration to continue upping my game a little bit. And who knows? Maybe if I had done that a little more with the one that I would have beat old Tom Repus there. No, I'm joking. I don't know if I could have beat him, but no, I think that's what it takes to climb up the ranks and not just medal, but bring home those golds and those best of shows. In some of those major cups and those kind of competitions.
Well, yeah, I mean, the analogy I like to give is, mead is to brewing as cooking is to baking.
Oh, there you go. Right. I concur.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Mix it up, put it in the oven, forget it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cooking is kind of a process. I get that.
Yeah, cooking's a process. You start and then you say, it needs a little bit of this, needs a little bit of this, and my hobby is cooking. That's sort of where I'm coming from.
Hey, me too. Hey, you know what? We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Will, you know what? Can you stick around? We got about another 15 minutes or so. We're gonna hit some of these Facebook friends here for a little bit, and if you want to stick around with us and help us wrap the show, we'd love to. We'd love to finish off with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. So here we go. This is the part that we really enjoy doing. Facebook friends, Reddit friends. Of course, this is where we try to answer questions from our mead makers and listeners out there with no formal expertise other than what we have each experienced in our own brew room. And, of course, that's a wide array of experience to boot. Let's start out the top here, guys. I'm going to do this verbatim. I have a mess of apples from our trees this year. My thought was to steam juice them for future sizer, but won't be taking honey from the hives until spring. What to keep the juice in until then? Glass carboys are a bit expensive as storage, but would be able to be heat preserved. I don't know about that, Jeff. Talking about preserving apple juice for what sounds like maybe 6-8 months. I don't know.
Do you have a freezer?
Yeah, a big freezer.
That's the most reasonable way I can think of it. Like I was talking about on the last episode, man, apple juice just seems to want to ferment. If you don't have a preservative in there to stop things from fermenting in it, the natural yeast on the apple skins just wants to go.
Yeah. Freezing it. That's my best advice, Ryan. He's looking to preserve, what sounds like a lot of apple juice. Best method?
The best method might be to not juice them.
Not juice them, yeah.
Apples, if apples last a long time.
They do.
If you store them, depending, I don't know where he's writing from or what kind of the region he's in, but if you've got a cool storage or a cold storage, apples last for months and months. Yeah. And there are some apples, I'm thinking about I think it's called the Arkansas black apple, which actually you don't want to eat until it's been stored for several months. That's when it really,
one of those
starts
apples
getting good. So I think about that. Think about, not depending on what your temperature situation, your cellar situation, that kind of a thing is, do you need to even store the apples or make juice out of it? You need to store the apples. If it does, I guess I don't know about freezing the juice. If you'd want to freeze the juice, if that might kind of change the flavor up a little bit too much on you. Otherwise, I mean, like Jeff is saying, you'd have to, I suppose you could put it in a keg and put a bunch of sulfites in it and then pressurize it and
hope for the best.
Hope for the best, but that sounds like a lot of work for apple juice. I'll tell you what, that really sounds like a lot. So if it's not lining up for you perfectly here, you might want to either get honey from somewhere else or apple juice. Different apple juice once you get your honey and sometimes things just don't line up. Sometimes, unfortunately, your fruits and your spices and your honeys and everything else just don't exactly line up perfectly. In which case, you've either got to get creative or start making substitutions.
Will, we've had people on the show who have actually taken apple juice and just let it start fermenting. Not adding anything to it. Your thoughts? Chime in here. What would you do with a bunch of apple juice that, if you wanted to make a sizer, adding honey later on, but you don't have, you get your own hives, but it's not time to take the honey from hives. What do you do with the apple juice?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing tomorrow is I'm picking up 18 gallons of wine juice. And I can tell you that I absolutely cannot ferment all of that at once, nor do I intend to. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it up into 3 or 4 gallon pails, toss them in the chest freezer, and then defrost them as I get to their place in my experimental batch lineup.
There you go.
But wine grapes are the same thing. They really want to ferment, and Midwest sent a set of instructions that said, well, you can just leave the bucket there, and there's yeast in there, and it'll start to ferment on its own.
Let it rip.
If you want to, but if you want to use your own yeast, well, I'm going to want to do that. Then you sulfite it. But that's basically my plan. Is I'm going to start a gallon and a half of port style of each. I'm getting 6 gallons of Syrah, 6 gallons of Nebbiolo, and 6 gallons of Frazzati, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And I basically got lots of experiments lined up this fall to like I said, I'm doing aroma this time, so playing with some it's getting off on a tangent. Just one thing Ryan said about cold storage of apples: you got to be pretty cold. My recollection is like 30, close to freezing, but not quite. So low 30s maybe. So just keep that in mind if you're trying to keep them long term in cold storage.
The other thing you could do, and I think we kind of touched on this, is, and maybe that's where you were going, JD, is just ferment it out, right? Just ferment the apple juice out, the apple cider out. Put it in a carboy, put an airlock on it, and make your cider, and then later on, either add your honey to it and re-ferment it, or make a mead and blend them.
Sure.
However you want to do that. But the other way to do it is just ferment your cider all the way out, make your cider, and then, they're really, you could, like I said, you could just add honey right to that, or just make a traditional and blend the two.
Well, and like JD was saying before, it takes some time for that apple character to really come back. So if you've got some cider sitting over the winter and you're going to add some honey to it to make a sizer later, that might just cut down some of that timeline for you.
Yeah.
That might work out in your favor.
Next one up on the list here, guys. This may be a Jeff question more than anything, but Ryan probably has a pretty good idea here too. Question about primary in a bucket. Of course, I don't know what Will. What's your science background, Will? Do you have a science background at all?
computer science.
Oh, okay, wrong science.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all right. I'm coming to this from linguistics, so it's all we're making do.
Oh my God. Okay, so question about primary in a bucket. Since it won't be in there long, do you have to use a food grade bucket, or would any cheap? Let me rephrase that. Or would any cheap ass 5-gallon bucket work? Also, if you wanted to only do a 3-gallon batch, with the extra air in the bucket be? This might be a Ryan. Well, no, let's start out with Jeff.
Sure.
Would the extra air in the bucket be problematic? Let's go back to the food grade part, though. I think that's the most important part because, it does make a difference, doesn't it?
It doesn't. It
buckets.
doesn't. So,
Yeah. Don't use the mop bucket either.
No, don't do that. But there are a lot of buckets out there, like the Homer bucket or the Lowe's Project bucket or whatever. It's been a while since I've looked at those, and I think those are all. If you look at the bottom of the bucket, they have that recycling sign with the number on it.
Yeah.
If those are number 2, that I believe that's HDPE. I think is the acronym for it.
I believe.
I think that is food grade.
Suitable
that's
for
the kind of plastic that you want to use for that.
Yeah.
There are a number of probably industrial practices that go on with those, like they may not completely finish it in a clean manner, so you may need to take some extra steps as far as like cleaning it before you use it.
Yeah,
would probably be advisable, but I think you'd probably be safe. I know a friend of mine has totally fermented in Lowe's Project buckets before with no issue other than the fact that they don't really close the way that the grommeted, like 6.5, 7-gallon buckets you get at the home brew store do.
Right.
I think it's a perfectly viable approach. As far as that extra airspace goes, in the second part of his question, for primary, I wouldn't bother too much about it, just because you're going to be kicking up so much CO2, you will end up with like a protective blanket over the top of it that there's very little to worry about as far as oxidization or any of the other negative effects you can see from having a lot of headspace. In secondary, it's a different story, but in primary, I think you're probably going to be just fine. I know I've definitely fermented a 5-gallon batch in a 7-gallon bucket and not seen any issue from it. So I would assume the same would apply here.
Ryan, any the food grade bucket part? I mean, I wouldn't, like Jess says. I mean, I'm looking at the bottom. Of course, I mean, I haven't fermented in a bucket for I don't know how many years now. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've always fermented in food grade. I mean, when I used to ferment in buckets more, I fermented in food grade buckets, and that was something I just always made sure that I was doing. And I mean, when he says cheap, are they any cheap bucket too? If the 5-gallon, the non-food grade 5-gallon bucket is a buck, I think the food grade one is $2. So you're still talking pretty cheap here.
Yeah.
On the topic of cheap buckets, go to Costco or go to your local supermarket, because I know Costco, for one, gets their frosting in these giant 5-gallon buckets.
Right.
And those are food grade. Those are obviously food grade.
Yeah.
They have nothing to do with those. I've literally seen those like piled up, stacked under the baked goods aisles. I have not inquired about taking one home myself, but intuition tells me they have nothing to do with those other than recycle them. And so if you ask for them, they're probably willing to part with those for nothing or next to nothing. So give that a shot if you're looking for cheap buckets.
So next one up on the list here, guys. Question on fruits for sweetening. This is going to be okay. So I did a small 1-gallon batch for a friend with his own honey. I was going to keep it as a trad, but now I think I'd like to add some frozen peaches from my tree. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. His wife likes it sweeter. Obviously, I want the peach flavor to shine. It just finished fermenting. I know if I add the peach now, it will ferment more. Should I stabilize, then add the peaches in secondary for a while, or just rack the secondary and let it ferment some? I know I might still have to back sweeten it a little anyway, but I want to get the most out of the peaches. Okay, so let me get my 2 cents in here. The amount of peaches, I mean, you need something bigger than a 1 gallon container to put this in, okay? If you want to extract some peach flavor into that thing using real peaches, frozen peaches or whatever, I don't even, I talked about this once before, kind of jokingly. I mean, go back to my pumpkin mead at one time. I mean, we're talking about displacement and the amount of pumpkin it took to get pumpkin flavor. Oh my God, dude. That's a whole other show too. Go to like Amaretti and just order some peach flavor and toss that in. Don't use the peaches because it's going to take so many peaches. I mean, a 1 gallon thing, I'm going to guess you're going to need at least a 5 gallon bucket because you're going to have lots of peaches in there to extract a peach flavor. Will, any thoughts on this whole peach thing?
Peach, I mean, I've never used them in a mead, but it's a pretty delicate flavor.
It is.
So my intuition would be that, that it would take a lot. But, I haven't really, I don't really do a lot of like fruit additions and secondaries. I don't have a lot of thoughts there.
Ryan, peaches, 1 gallon traditional. He wants to turn it into a peach mead. What's your thoughts?
I've gotten a lot of peach flavor by using nectarines.
Oh, there you go. Good choice.
Yep.
So you might want to do that. I know we've said it several shows here, but I mean, if you might want to use something like a flavoring, like an Amaretti or something. If you just want to get that flavor in there, but you're going to add, yes, the sweetness is the dance floor for that flavor to shine. So a little bit sweeter is going to help bring out some more of that flavor. And yeah, you're gonna probably have to add a fair amount, even at a 1 gallon, a fair amount to get that strong peach flavor, or that noticeable peach flavor, I should say.
Sounds good, Jeff. Peaches,
Matt, if you're dead set on using your own peaches for this, I would take a page from our friend a few questions back and try steam juicing, and then once you've got it steam juiced, maybe even freeze concentrate that. Because I tell you what, there is so much water content in the peaches themselves that I would be afraid you would dilute the mead by putting enough peaches to get a good peach flavor into the mead.
Yeah.
No. If you're not going to add the flavoring like Amaretti or whichever LD Carlson, however you want to approach that, man, you've really got to do something about the water content to those, and you've really got to concentrate it out. So that would be my approach if money, time, and effort were no object. Otherwise, I would be really concerned about dilution and just, like JD said, the amount of like fruit you have to add to it to really get a good flavor. Again, like adding additional fruits, like I've heard apricots, nectarines, adding some of those to the peach really brings out the peach flavor. That might be advantageous as well. So, I would take that and run with it.
A couple ounces of Amaretti. And this is a good segue. This is a good segue into the next one, okay? Skipping down here, Jeff, if you're looking at it, I'm looking for some advice on how to get the most volume out of all my fruit, no water, what does that say? Out of my all fruit, no water melomels. Okay, that's different.
There you go.
I always feel like I'm leaving a ton of goodness behind after my first rack, and I want to be more efficient. Go for it, Jeff.
So what he's talking about here is essentially he's not adding water to the melomels. He's using enzymes or another product to break down just the straight up fruit
Yeah.
to get the water and the fruit sugars out of it, and then fermenting off of that, which is a very popular way to do things. It's time consuming, but very popular, and for good reason, because you're getting a lot of fruit flavor out of that. As far as preserving more of the product, the volume, that's a little dicey, because you're talking about you're talking about mitigating a lot of fibrous and other like skins and the parts that really make up the fruit that you're breaking up there in the process.
Yeah. Well,
So-
he's even talking about pressing the fruit after racking to get as much volume as possible. So,
I would think if you're going to take that approach, what you probably want to do is in an early phase, you want to hit it with enzymes like lalazyme or something in that same family of like not just pectic but other enzymes as well, to really break it down.
Yeah.
And then before you add the yeast, do the press then, so that you've got as much of that content and as much of the other stuff like the fiber and the skins and stuff like that off. That way you're leaving just the juice to ferment with,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Will, I know you haven't done a whole lot of melomels, but any thoughts on doing like an all fruit, no water mead?
I did one earlier this year.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, Costco berries, Lalazyme EX,
Okay.
a few pounds of honey. I messed up racking real good. Wound up only getting, half a gallon.
Couple of cups.
Half gallon. And then the rest, I, basically pitched a BP, skeeter pea except with honey
There you go.
on the rest. But what I've been told is that pressing your fruit in a no water melomel, you've got a real danger of over extracting tannins,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
winding up way more astringent than you really want to be.
Yeah, especially if
and-
you're using, fruits with, like strawberries, blackberries, those little tiny seeds. I mean, you're talking about billions of seeds. It adds a crap load of tannin, maybe unwanted tannin to that mix too. So, I don't know, guys. I think we're going to drop it right there for the night. And I'll tell you what, we've got to have Will back. I mean, this has just been what a phenomenal segment with Will Ott. And we definitely have to have you back, Will. Thank you so much for hanging out with us in this episode.
Anytime.
I mean, you've got some kind of a background there that I think we can absolutely put to use here. So I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I wouldn't mind having you back at least once a month. Let's just talk mead.
I can't imagine that I'm that interesting.
Nah, come on, dude, you fit right in. I mean, if you knew. We had, Mississippi Chris, Aaron Martin was here with us for a while, and Ryan came along. Jeff been here with me since the very beginning. In fact, he's the first one I recruited. Me and Chris, and we've just been having just a ball of fun. Talking about meat. I mean, none of us are experts. All of us have different degrees of experience. And I think that's what brings a lot to this show. But
I'll be happy to come back.
Absolutely. And again, thanks, Will, for hanging out with us. So, hey, don't forget, let us know what you're brewing. Email us, info@themeathouse.com, or just send us a message on that Facebook deal. I tell you, Jeff, I need to go back in there and start writing down some names, because every time I pop in there, there's like somebody new chatting us up in that messenger thing, that inbox thing that I...
Yep.
I'm not a real Facebook guy other than the crap I put up on my own, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So we need to write down those names and get them at least mention their names on the show here. But hey, you can send us a message over there on that Facebook deal or their Twitter thing. Hey, they're both at the Mead House. So in the meantime, hey, happy mead making. That's it for this episode. Hey, Ryan, you know the drill. Flip the lights off. Jeff slammed the door shut. And hey, Will, if you can help Jeff lock her up, hey, we'll be back next week with episode number 1. I can't believe this either. This was like episode 175, 175 of these things, guys. Next week, 176. Unbelievable milestone. But hey, we're gone.